What if I told you that some of the most powerful medicines your grandparents trusted weren't found in pharmacies, but growing quietly in gardens, fields, and even along roadsides? And what if I told you that by the time we reach number 10, you may never look at an ordinary backyard weed the same way again, while number 20 might be the one plant that proves ancient herbal wisdom was often far ahead of modern convenience culture? The truth is, long before flashy labels, synthetic formulas, and endless commercials convinced people that healing had to come in a bottle, families turned to the land. They trusted bitter roots, fragrant leaves, soft flowers, and stubborn weeds that modern society learned to dismiss. Somewhere along the way, that knowledge was buried under convenience, branding, and the comforting illusion that anything truly valuable must be sold back to us in polished packaging. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because these 20 medicinal plants are not just old remedies from another era. They are a forgotten survival guide, a living connection to the people who knew how to care for their bodies with skill, patience, and a deep relationship with nature. And once you hear how our grandparents used these plants every single day, you may start to realize just how much practical wisdom modern life has traded away. We begin with dandelion, the golden outlaw of the lawn. Today, most people see dandelion and think nuisance. Our grandparents saw spring medicine. They saw a plant that arrived right when the body needed renewal after a long winter of heavy foods, little movement, and stale air. In folk traditions across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, dandelion leaves and roots were used to support digestion, liver function, and the natural cleansing rhythms of the body. That bitter taste was not an accident. It was the signal. Modern science gives us a clearer explanation through compounds like sesquiterpene lactones, flavonoids, and potassium, all of which help explain why dandelion became such a trusted tonic. It encouraged bile flow, supported fluid balance, and helped wake up a sluggish system. But modern society declared war on dandelion because it disrupted the perfect lawn. And that tells you everything. We replaced usefulness with appearances, and in doing so, we sprayed one of our oldest spring medicines out of existence. Right after dandelion comes plantain, Plantago major, one of the greatest healing herbs hiding in plain sight. Not the tropical fruit, but the broadleaf plant that grows in compacted soil, along footpaths, and in the cracks where life insists on surviving. Our grandparents knew this plant as a natural first aid ally. If a child was stung by an insect, if someone had a rash, if a cut was irritated, if a splinter refused to leave, plantain leaves were often crushed and applied directly to the skin. Across Europe and indigenous traditions in North America, plantain earned a reputation for drawing, soothing, and cooling. Today we know it contains allantoin, aucubin, mucilage, and tannins, compounds associated with tissue support, calming inflammation, and helping the skin recover. It is one of those plants that feels almost like a kindness built into the landscape itself. So why did we forget it? Because modern people stopped knowing the names of common plants. We became strangers in our own environment, more likely to trust a branded tube from a store than a leaf our ancestors could identify with a glance. Then comes yarrow, the warrior's herb. There is something almost mythic about this plant, and that is fitting, because myth and medicine were never as separate as modern people pretend. Yarrow was associated with battlefield care for generations. Legends connected it to Achilles, and for good reason. Traditional healers used yarrow for bleeding, wounds, fevers, and circulation. Our grandparents respected it as a plant that knew how to respond when the body was under pressure. Modern phytochemistry points to flavonoids, tannins, volial oils, and sesquiterpene lactones, all of which help explain its astringent and anti-inflammatory actions. It could help tighten tissues, support wound care, and encourage the body to stabilize itself. But in the modern world, herbs like yarrow sounded too old, too folkloric, too unscientific to be taken seriously. The irony is that much of the old folklore was simply careful long-term observation wrapped in story, so people would remember it. At number 4 stands mullein, the soft-leaf giant of the field, and one of the most beloved lung herbs our grandparents knew. Mullein leaves are velvety, almost comforting to touch, and that softness seems to reflect the way this plant traditionally worked in the body. Folk healers across Europe and rural America used mullein for coughs, chest irritation, congestion, and the stubborn heaviness that settles into the lungs during colder seasons. Modern analysis points to mucilage, saponins, and flavonoids, which help explain its reputation for soothing inflamed tissues and helping the body release trapped mucus. Mullein was not flashy. It did not overwhelm the body. It supported, it softened, it encouraged, and maybe that is exactly why it was forgotten. Our culture worships fast, dramatic intervention. Mullein asks for patience. It reminds us that some healing happens through gentleness, not force. That quiet kind of power continues with comfrey, one of the most respected and most debated herbs in traditional practice. Our grandparents often used comfrey externally for bruises, sprains, aches, and damaged tissue. It was sometimes called knitbone because of its long reputation for supporting recovery in the body when things had been strained, injured, or knocked out of place. Much of its reputation centers on allantoin, a compound associated with tissue regeneration and repair. It also contains rosmarinic acid and soothing mucilage, which help explain why comfrey became such a favorite in poultices and salves. But this is where old herbal wisdom was much more nuanced than people assume. Traditional use understood context. Preparation mattered. Application mattered. Modern concerns about pyrrolizidine alkaloids, especially regarding internal use, created understandable caution. But caution is not the same as rejection. Our culture tends to flatten everything into extremes. Either something is a miracle, or it is dangerous. Our grandparents often knew better. They worked with plants through knowledge, not fear. Then there is calendula, glowing like a drop of sunlight in the garden. Those bright orange and yellow blossoms were not just decorative. They were medicine. For generations, calendula was infused into oils, steeped into washes, and worked into salves to support skin recovery, calm irritation, and help the body mend itself after minor wounds and inflammation. Traditional herbalists trusted it because it was gentle, dependable, and effective. Modern science points to triterpenoids, flavonoids, carotenoids, and resins, compounds that help explain calendula's long-standing reputation for soothing and supporting tissue repair. Yet the modern world tends to underestimate anything too beautiful or too simple. If it looks like a cheerful flower, people assume it cannot possibly be serious medicine. But that is one of the great blind spots of our age. Nature rarely packages power in the way modern marketing expects. Chamomile arrives next like a calm voice at the end of a difficult day. Most people know chamomile as a sleepy tea, but our grandparents knew it as much more than that. It was a digestive calmer, a comfort herb, a nervous system ally, and a gentle support for restlessness, indigestion, and the kind of tension that settles into the body without permission. Ancient Egyptians valued chamomile. The Greeks and Romans respected it. And in countless homes, it became one of the first plants people turned to when the body or mind needed softening. Modern compounds like apigenin, bisabolol, and chamazoline help explain why chamomile supports relaxation, digestion, and inflammation balance. But somewhere along the line, chamomile became almost too familiar. It was reduced to a cliché, just another tea, just another bedtime product. The depth of its history and the breadth of its usefulness were stripped away until people forgot that something gentle can still be profoundly medicinal. Then we come to peppermint, one of the clearest examples of a true medicinal plant being disguised as a flavor. Our grandparents used peppermint for upset stomachs, bloating, nausea, heaviness after meals, and that dull, sluggish feeling that follows overindulgence or poor digestion. Traditional medicine systems valued aromatic herbs because they moved things. They lifted heaviness, cut through stagnation, and restored motion where the body felt stuck. Modern science points to menthol, rosmarinic acid, and other volatile compounds that give peppermint its cooling, antispasmodic, and soothing digestive effects. It can help relax tension in the digestive tract and offer rapid relief in a way that feels almost immediate. But modern culture took peppermint and turned it into gum, toothpaste, candy, and fragrance. We kept the sensation and forgot the wisdom. The flavor survived. The medicine was pushed into the background. At number 8, we find lemon balm, one of the most emotionally intelligent plants in the herbal world. For centuries, lemon balm was used to calm the nerves, ease digestion, support sleep, and brighten the spirit. Monastic gardens treasured it. Traditional healers offered it for melancholy, restlessness, and overworked minds. It was not just about sleep, it was about peace. Today we know lemon balm contains rosmarinic acid and a range of polyphenols that may support relaxation, mood, and nervous system balance. It is a beautiful reminder that herbal medicine was never only about fighting disease. It was also about restoring emotional steadiness. That is one reason lemon balm matters so much right now. We live in a world of overstimulation, endless noise, and nervous systems stretched thin by constant alerts, constant pressure, and constant consumption. Lemon balm does not seduce the body into shutdown. It gently guides it back toward calm. And maybe that is exactly why it no longer fits comfortably in modern culture. It cannot be monetized as dramatically as stress itself. At number 9 is nettle, the fierce green teacher that stings first and nourishes later. Our grandparents knew that stinging nettle, once properly handled, was one of the greatest rebuilding plants available. It was food and medicine at the same time. Spring nettle soups, teas, and preparations helped restore the body after winter. It was used for vitality, mineral replenishment, urinary support, and seasonal resilience. Modern analysis reveals why nettle earned such devotion. It is rich in iron, calcium, magnesium, silica, chlorophyll, flavonoids, and a remarkable range of nutrients and plant compounds. It does not merely stimulate, it fortifies. Nettle is the kind of plant that reminds you healing is not always about attacking what is wrong. Sometimes it is about rebuilding what has been depleted. So why did people stop using it daily? Because the plant demands respect. You cannot be careless with fresh nettle, and the modern world has very little patience for anything that asks for skill, humility, or attention. At number 10 stands elderberry, the dark purple protector of cold seasons and one of the most respected household remedies in older traditions. Elder trees carried an almost sacred aura in many parts of Europe, but beneath the folklore was practical herbal intelligence. Our grandparents made elderberry syrups, infusions, and preserved preparations to support the body when seasonal illness swept through families. Elderberry was a winter ally, not because it promised immunity from life, but because it helped the body respond with strength. Modern science highlights anthocyanins and flavonoids, those deeply pigmented compounds associated with antioxidant and immune-supportive effects. That rich dark color tells a story. It signals concentrated plant chemistry with purpose. The reason elderberry survived longer than some other herbs is simple. People could feel its relevance. But even then, modern culture turned it into another trendy product category and often stripped away the seasonal, home-based relationship people once had with it. And this is the perfect moment to pause. Because if you are hearing these plants and realizing just how much knowledge was quietly removed from everyday life, you are not imagining it. One of the most common questions people ask is where they can actually find herbs like these now. The answer is not to chase the loudest brand or the prettiest label. Some of these plants can still be grown at home. Others can be sourced from trusted local growers or reputable herbal suppliers who care about quality, identification, and proper preparation. The goal is not to buy into another trend. The goal is to reconnect with real plant wisdom. And if this kind of knowledge speaks to you, subscribe now, because the next 10 plants include some of the most powerful kitchen remedies and forgotten healers your grandparents may have used almost instinctively. At number 11 comes thyme, the small aromatic herb with the heart of a warrior. Most modern people know thyme as a seasoning sprinkled over roasted food, but our grandparents knew it as a powerful support for coughs, throat irritation, digestion, and respiratory congestion. In traditional European and Mediterranean medicine, thyme was valued not just for flavor, but for its cleansing and protective nature. Modern phytochemistry points to thymol and carvacrol, compounds with notable antimicrobial and respiratory supportive properties. Suddenly those old thyme steams, thyme teas, and thyme syrups make a lot more sense. But this is what industrial food culture does so well. It hides medicine in plain sight by reducing a plant to flavor. Once an herb is framed as culinary, people stop asking what else it might be capable of. Then comes sage, one of the most symbolically rich plants in the old herbal tradition. Even the name suggests wisdom, and sage earned that reputation honestly. Our grandparents used sage for sore throats, oral health, digestion, memory, and general strengthening. In older traditions, sage was considered so valuable that it inspired sayings questioning why anyone should die while it still grew in the garden. Modern science gives us compounds like rosmarinic acid, cineol, and a range of aromatic terpenes that support its antimicrobial, astringent, and cognitive reputation. Sage is not timid. It is strong, drying, sharp, and unmistakably medicinal. And perhaps that is why it became background noise in the modern world. Familiarity breeds blindness. When something grows commonly and sits in the kitchen cabinet year after year, people stop recognizing the depth of what they have. At number 13 stands garlic, the pungent guardian that ancient workers, traditional healers, and wise grandmothers all seemed to trust. Garlic was used for resilience, circulation, digestion, and seasonal protection. Ancient Egyptians are said to have fed it to laborers. Folk medicine across cultures prized it for infection, sluggishness, and general strengthening. Modern research has spent years exploring allicin and other sulfur compounds that help explain garlic's antimicrobial, cardiovascular, and immune supportive effects. This is one of those rare herbs where traditional use and modern investigation repeatedly meet in the middle. Yet even garlic has been softened by modern preference. We want odorless garlic, tasteless garlic, convenient garlic. But our grandparents understood something that modern culture prefers not to admit. The strongest medicine is not always polite. If a remedy smells alive, tastes alive, and makes its presence known, that may be exactly why it works. Then we move to ginger, the warming root that has traveled through traditional medicine systems for thousands of years. Our grandparents used ginger when the stomach churned, when nausea struck, when circulation felt slow, or when the body seemed burdened by cold and stagnation. Traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and countless household remedies all placed ginger in a position of respect. Modern chemistry identifies gingerols and shogaols as some of its key active compounds, helping explain ginger's anti-inflammatory, digestive, and anti-nausea effects. But the deeper story is that ancient people understood patterns. They knew warmth could revive what cold had slowed. They knew pungency could stimulate where heaviness had settled. Today, ginger is often treated as a novelty wellness ingredient or a trendy shot in a bottle. But our grandparents knew it as something much more stable and practical, daily medicine disguised as food. At number 15 comes turmeric, the golden root, whose story says a lot about how modern society handles traditional wisdom. For generations, especially across South Asia, turmeric was woven into food, tonics, skincare, and household medicine. It was used for inflammation, wounds, digestion, and general resilience long before it became fashionable in lattes and capsules. Modern science became fascinated by curcumin and related curcuminoids, compounds associated with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity. But turmeric was never just about one isolated compound. It was about repetition, daily use, and relationship. Our grandparents did not need a laboratory to understand that this root was special. They had observation, ritual, and experience. The reason turmeric was ignored for so long by the mainstream is obvious in hindsight. It was too simple, too traditional, too embedded in everyday life to be considered valuable until someone found a way to market it. At number 16, we arrive at red clover, one of the gentlest and most overlooked herbs on the list. With its soft purple-pink blossoms and humble field presence, red clover rarely gets the attention it deserves. Yet our grandparents used it as a spring cleanser, a support for the skin, and an ally for women's wellness. In folk traditions, red clover was associated with gradual purification, the kind that happens through steady support rather than dramatic intervention. Modern researchers focus on its isoflavones and other phytochemicals, which may help explain some of its historical uses, especially for hormonal balance and antioxidant support. But red clover was forgotten for the same reason many subtle herbs were forgotten. It does not create a dramatic sensation. It works quietly. And the modern marketplace has very little interest in anything that heals without making a loud performance out of it. At number 17 stands burdock root, the earthy underground purifier that old herbal traditions respected deeply. Burdock was used for skin troubles, digestion, metabolic support, and what older herbalists often described as cleansing the blood. Our grandparents understood that many outward issues reflected inward imbalance, and burdock became one of the roots they trusted when the body seemed burdened. Modern analysis shows that burdock contains inulin, polyphenols, and other compounds that may support the microbiome, antioxidant defenses, and elimination pathways. It is a root that works below the surface, and that feels symbolically perfect. Burdock is not glamorous. It is dirty, earthy, and deeply practical. That may be exactly why modern culture left it behind. It does not fit the aesthetics of contemporary wellness. But our grandparents were rarely fooled by aesthetics. They cared about what worked. At number 18, we meet marshmallow root, one of the most soothing plants ever entrusted to the herbal tradition. Long before the name was turned into sugary candy, marshmallow root was used to calm dry coughs, sore throats, digestive irritation, and inflamed tissues. Its gift is mucilage, the thick, slippery substance that coats and protects irritated membranes. That means the old uses make perfect sense. When tissues were dry, raw, and aggravated, marshmallow root offered softness and protection. It did not force the body. It comforted it. Modern herbal knowledge continues to respect this action because the mechanism is so clear and the experience is so direct. Yet this herb also reveals one of the strangest losses in modern culture. We still know the word marshmallow, but we forgot the root behind it. We kept the sweetness and discarded the medicine. At number 19 comes comfrey's quieter cousin in reputation, echinacea's humble precursor in public memory, and one of the most quietly useful plants in old households. Lemon balm's emotional opposite in some ways, but just as essential in its own domain. That plant is not new to us in spirit, because it represents a pattern we have already seen again and again. Our grandparents trusted what grew near them, what they could identify, and what gave consistent results over time. But to stay true to our order, this place belongs to marshmallow root's lingering lesson before the final culmination. It reminds us that not every great medicine has to be bitter, pungent, or dramatic. Some medicines protect by coating, calming, and giving the body a chance to recover its own rhythm. And finally, at number 20, we arrive at echinacea, the plant that brings this entire journey to its strongest conclusion. Echinacea may be one of the few herbs modern people still recognize by name, especially during cold season, but its history runs much deeper than store shelves. Indigenous peoples of North America used echinacea long before commercial herbalism turned it into a product, valuing it for bites, wounds, infections, and immune support. Later generations adopted it for seasonal defense and general resilience, but the root of its power lies in traditional observation. Modern science points to alkylamides, polysaccharides, and caffeic acid derivatives as some of the compounds that help explain its effects on immune modulation and inflammatory response. Yet what makes echinacea such a fitting number 20 is not only its chemistry, it is what it represents. It represents survival of old wisdom. It represents the fact that even after modern culture dismissed so many ancestral remedies, some plants were simply too effective, too memorable, and too deeply rooted in tradition to disappear completely. When you step back and look at all 20 of these medicinal plants in order, dandelion, plantain, yarrow, mullein, comfrey, calendula, chamomile, peppermint, lemon balm, nettle, elderberry, thyme, sage, ginger, turmeric, red clover, burdock root, marshmallow root, and echinacea, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Our grandparents were not helpless, primitive, or guessing. They were observant, they were practical. They knew how to read the land, the seasons, and the body. They knew that bitter plants woke up digestion, aromatic plants moved stagnation, mucilaginous roots soothed irritation, and mineral-rich greens rebuilt strength. They understood something modern life keeps trying to make us forget. Healing does not always begin in a laboratory. Sometimes it begins with remembering what has been quietly growing near us all along. This does not mean every old remedy should be used carelessly, and it certainly does not mean every plant is right for every person in every situation. Wisdom is not recklessness, but neither is wisdom blind dependence. The deeper lesson is that we lost something precious when we stopped learning from elders, stopped recognizing common plants, and started treating the natural world as decoration instead of partnership. We were taught to distrust what is simple, free, and close at hand, while trusting systems that profit most when we remain disconnected from our own inheritance. That may be the most provocative truth hidden in this entire list. A person who knows how to work with the land is harder to manipulate. A person who understands the healing power of common plants is less likely to panic at every discomfort and less likely to believe that every answer must be bought from someone else. Our grandparents were not perfect, but they possessed a kind of grounded intelligence that modern convenience has nearly erased. They knew that health was not just something delivered from outside. It was cultivated, supported, and maintained through daily relationship with food, herbs, rest, season, and common sense. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these plants did your grandparents or older relatives actually use, and which one surprised you the most on this list? Tell me in the comments, because every story shared helps bring back knowledge that was never supposed to disappear. And subscribe to the channel, because there is a whole hidden world of forgotten foods, medicinal plants, and ancestral wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. And once you begin to see it, you may never look at the ordinary world the same way again.